welcome to our special My Counselor Live 2-day event. Oh my goodness, I've been looking forward to this. I'm so excited to sit down with these two incredible clinicians here at MCO. We've got Josh Spurlock joining us and Tish Hedger joining us, and we're going to tackle all of the questions that you've been asking around sex therapy. Mm-hmm. I know, bad word, right? Sex, bad word? No, we're going to talk all about it. We're going to tackle all of your questions around it that you guys have been sending in with these two therapists who are both trained in sex therapy and have such deep knowledge and wisdom around it. So I'm going to actually hand the mic over to Josh, let him introduce himself, and then same for Tish. So Josh, go ahead, introduce yourself to the people watching.
Thanks, Sori. Hey, I'm so excited to be back on the live show and doing Q&A or answering questions. You know, this topic of sex is such a big deal, and there's just not a lot of voices out there speaking to it and speaking God's truth about it, speaking clinically sound truth about it. So it's super exciting to be here with you and get a chance to do this again with Tish, which is always a lot of fun too. So I'm Josh Spurlock, founder of MyCounselor.Online, licensed professional counselor, certified sex therapist, and theology nerd. I guess that's
awesome.
my gig.
Love it. Great, Josh. I'm so happy you're here today. And Tish, would you mind just going ahead and introducing yourself?
Yeah, hi. I'm Tish Hedger. I'm the interim clinical director here at MCO, and it's so good to be here with you guys. I love the live show, and this is a really important topic. I think sex and our sexuality, God created everyone with sexuality. There's no one on the planet that's not impacted by sexuality, and so it's a very important to make space for it, to be able to have open and honest conversation, a place where we can talk about real questions that people have, and hopefully you guys will find it to be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope that all the people tuning in have their ears open and are ready for so much good stuff from you guys. I'm pumped. And we're going to jump right in. Guys, we have gotten so many questions. Y'all can always submit your questions at MyCounselor.Online/ask. And a lot of the questions that we've been getting over the last few months are around sex therapy. And I thought, who better to talk about these questions with than you two, who are so knowledgeable about this. And I think that you can both speak into it in very different ways. As clinicians, as a man, as a woman, I am super excited. So we're going to dive into this first question right off the bat. We're going in swinging. So let's start with this one. This wife says, "Is it wrong that my husband can't make me orgasm? Only I can. Even during vaginal intercourse, I have to be stimulating myself in order to orgasm." So I would actually love if Tish, you could start off, as this question did come from a woman. What's your perspective on this?
Yeah, I think it's really important to know that, number one, not every woman can orgasm by vaginal entry only. And so some women can, but not every woman can orgasm just through intercourse. And so I think I would just
say that's like the majority that can't, because I feel like I feel like that's kind of common to not be able to do it during.
Totally. Like 2/3 of women aren't able to orgasm with intercourse alone. Totally.
Yeah, so very, very normal. So I would want to normalize her experience. And then I think I would want to, talk to this wife and just kind of, maybe if it's normalized, it can give them space to kind of talk about how they're experiencing their, kind of intimacy and what they would like to see happen. If she would like to invite her husband to be kind of a part of stimulating her, and if they would like that to be more of a couple's experience, if they're okay with how it's going, I think I would want to really normalize that. The question is, do they feel connected? Is it enjoyable? Is it an experience that they both feel really good about? And if it is, then it's that's great. And if there is kind of a place where she would say, hey, I really want to invite my husband to, maybe be the one that's stimulating me, but I think I would just really want to encourage her to be open about that, to feel bold about talking to her husband about that. Like, how is her husband experiencing that? And I think just to have a curiosity that, sexuality in a relationship is really meant to be playful. It's meant to be fun. And the idea is that we would be continuing to grow and be curious and be able to increase our sexual repertoire as a couple. And so I think I would just really want to invite the couple to have an open conversation about their experience and about what they want.
Totally.
Yeah, that's great. That's such an empowering answer to that question too. I love that. I think that's awesome. Josh, what would you kind of respond to that?
Yeah, I was just loving the piece about recognizing how we can sometimes confine ourselves within a box or be comparing ourselves to other people's experience. And we're going, is it supposed to be like this? Is it okay for it to be like this? Is it allowed to be like this? And can really compare our experience as though there's some kind of one set standard way to connect in the way it's supposed to be. And I appreciate Tish's answer and just saying, hey, sex is really about us connecting and enjoying the experience together. And let's not assume that there's a problem just because it's different than maybe a girlfriend's experience or someone else's experience. And so if it works for us, if it's a fun, connective, playful thing, if it's kind of the aligns with the heart of God in terms of sexuality and enjoying a connective experience together, let's not jump to the conclusion that it's that there's something wrong or a problem that's there, and instead be curious about and have the dialogue and conversation about it. And I'd also want to add then that it is totally normal for a wife to be more informed about what feels good to her than her husband, right? Like, he is not connected to your nerve endings.
That was going to kind of be part 2 to this question, was going to be, what's the science behind, the wife having that orgasm or being stimulated? Like, what's the science behind that?
Totally. Yeah. So there's this reality that men aren't like equipped with some sort of chemical they disperse out that causes a orgasm in a woman, or a secret knowledge that's kind of embedded into male DNA that knows how to pleasure every woman to orgasm. Like, that's just not reality. That's not true at all. Yeah. And that every woman is so different.
Though, right?
Right. There's a kind of cultural myth, right, that a real man is going to know how to kind of, pleasure every woman to orgasm perfectly.
You're like, no, real men don't know what to do.
For real. Real men have the courage to be honest with themselves and have an honest dialogue with their partner about, hey, you're going to have to share feedback and show the way, because even what feels great in one experience may be very different in the next. And so I'd say it's a really common thing for a wife to have to lead the way in terms of understanding her body and understanding her pathways to orgasm.
It's like every woman is different. Every woman's experience is different from encounter to encounter. And so there is not like a surefire straight shot, like, if I do this to my wife every single time, then it's for sure going to be an enjoyable, pleasurable experience. For her, like, women are created physiologically so complex, and our hormone levels. And
I was going to say, we don't even know.
Right. No, exactly. And so even whenever you think about the actual science of, stimulating a woman, that an exact touch at an earlier part of the arousal process might feel unpleasant, might feel uncomfortable, might feel ticklish, versus that same touch later on in the arousal process when her body is more aroused could feel very pleasurable. And so there's no scenario that any man could figure out and like know, like, I have cracked the code. But it's like feminine sexuality is really designed for there to have to be an open dialogue, which I really think that was by God's design.
Yeah.
Totally.
Right. And I feel like when she is enjoying it more and things are better for her, it makes it better for him too. And it just makes the whole thing very harmonious in the way it was designed to be.
Yes, you're so right, Tori. And I think that's such a key piece to understand in a sexual relationship is, the enjoyment that we have when our spouse is enjoying themselves, and how that is an accelerator for us, and that it is totally legitimate. And for, a lot of men, I'd say most men, if not all men, that there's a real turn on for a husband, for man, in seeing and hearing and knowing that his wife is enjoying herself sexually. And so that only becomes an issue or a problem as far as who's doing what when there's an expectation of some sort there, that, I'm supposed to be doing this, not you, or you're supposed to be doing this, not me. And there's these kind of expectations that create judgment, create performance anxiety, and fear of disappointment. Those are the things that then get in the way of the experience.
Right.
Expectations, I feel like, it can be a couple's worst enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And really unfair in setting the couple up for a sense of failure, and that kills the whole atmosphere of it being fun and playful, and for there to be curiosity and connection. And so I think being able to say, hey, let's not have expectations of like, it has to be this one right way.
So true. So true. Yeah. Do either of you have, I guess, an example in, one of your experiences, your clients, where this conversation has come up kind of expectations, of sexual expectations? Can either of you give kind of an example of that?
Let me think about this. Like every single couple that I've ever worked with, and
That's
probably,
great. That's good.
like it really all started with Adam and Eve, right? It was the first conversation that was had kind of around this. I wasn't there, but I can tell you for sure it happened,
Yeah.
right? That it's just reality, that we grow up with these expectations that come from the locker room, that come from media, that come from, who knows where, right? About what it's supposed to be like, what male sexuality is supposed to look like, what female sexuality, what sex between husband and wife is supposed to be like. And that creates all sorts of internal anxiety and pressure, and comparison against this idealized sexual self, and what that's supposed to be. And so every individual brings that into their relationship. And so every couple has to have this conversation, because it's happening inside your head, whether or not you're having it between you or not. These things are there and are part of what's going on.
Yeah. So true. So true. That's awesome. You guys, I'm already learning a ton. I'm telling you, every time that these sex therapy themed My Counselor Lives happen, I tune in, and usually I don't get to be a part of it, and I kind of hand it over to you guys, but it's so fun for me to be able to kind of sit as a panel and really panel to you guys, like what questions, and I feel like I'm learning right along with the people that are listening right now. So thank you.
Tori's got a list of questions from all of her girlfriends that have kind of gotten slipped in here in the mix.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
all right, guys,
Like,
we've got
after
a
everyone,
live show going on, and so what do you want to know?
Right. Or I hop on, after I watch a My Counselor Live, and I'm just like, All right, here's my questions. Like sometimes these questions feel so real and relatable, and
Totally.
they're just so great. So we're gonna hop into our next question. And Tish, I'm gonna send this toward you first. But this question comes from a young lady who says, I recently lost my virginity. I slightly bled and it was extremely painful. I believe I had a tear. What should I do?
Oh, yeah. So I think that I would want to normalize that it is very normal that when, the tissue that around the vaginal area is very sensitive, and that it is normal for there to be some bleeding. I would say that kind of tearing is not normal,
Mm.
and that maybe that's an indicator that something was going on. And so pain is always like a red light in sexuality. And so if there's intense pain or if there's like tearing, then I would say wanting to say, hey, something is going on that is not a normal kind of sexual experience, in the sense of that is just like what it is. And so, kind of deal with it. But to be able to troubleshoot of, okay, something is going on. Either your body was not aroused and was not like ready for entry, and which can happen a lot, that the body has to be ready into a point where there's vasocongestion, which means blood has is flowing in that area and is creating like an ability to receive intercourse. And sometimes not knowing like what that feels like or what to be looking for can cause entry to happen before a point that the body is really ready. And so I think I would really want to troubleshoot and talk through that, but really let her know, like, okay, so glad you're reaching out. So glad that you're not just keeping this inside and being like, okay, I guess that was just
Normal.
that's just what I need to deal with. And hopefully it'll be better next time, right? Anytime sex is painful, it's like, okay, we do not push through the pain.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you said that pain in sexuality is a red light, because I think, especially in women, I think that we grow up believing that sex is supposed to be painful, or that it's going to be painful at the beginning. And there's always that, when you're talking about the wedding night, your friends are like, are you scared? Are you nervous? You scared it's going to hurt? Like I feel like we have normalized it being painful to the point where maybe we just expect it when we lose virginity.
Yes. And I think I would want her to know that it's a normal experience to have because of what you're saying.
Right.
Become like a norm that have just like expect it to be this way, and just keep doing it, and eventually it will get better. Just keep practicing, push through the pain, and eventually it will get better. Sometimes it does. Sometimes there's a natural, like intuitive sense that a couple can have as they're learning sexuality. And for those couples, it doesn't become a chronic problem. But I think I would whenever you push through the pain, there's a danger of pairing negative emotion with your sexuality.
Yeah, that's so true.
And the body is wired to protect you from painful experiences. So that can create a trigger of sexuality being a trigger that your body is like, oh, something painful, something bad is coming.
Right.
The reflex that I'm so glad she's reaching out, because I don't want that to happen to her. And I think I'm so glad she's speaking out about this, so that a lot of women out there can know, hey, sex isn't normal. If you're having sex and it's painful, reach out. It's a red light. Don't push through pain.
Yeah, just because pain is common doesn't mean that's the way it's supposed to be. Sex is supposed to be a good experience that feels good, bodily, emotionally, spiritually. Like sex is supposed to be a good experience, and that for both partners, both folks involved in the experience. And if it's not, something's not right. Something's off. And I think, Tori, like you were saying, and Tish, that it's exceedingly common for there to be, a first experience to be painful and be negative, but that doesn't mean that it's the way it has to be. That for the reasons that Tish listed out, oftentimes that are related to just not a lot of good education about sex and about body and what to expect and how to navigate that. kind of causes that to be reinforced and causes that to happen again and again. And so I just love the question, love hopefully those that can hear this that are, maybe, haven't had that first sexual experience, maybe they're engaged, maybe they're, headed towards their wedding night and kind of have all of these pieces of information out there to be able to know that, hey, it doesn't have to be like that. And things like lube is really wonderful for your wedding night because it's common for you to be anxious and to not lubricate like you might otherwise in an established sexual relationship. It'd be okay not to have intercourse, that we can have fun sexually and not have intercourse to be on our wedding night. We can still enjoy each other's body and get comfortable.
Right, that it's okay, that we can normalize taking our time with something that is such a huge change.
Yeah, that rush is really where a lot of that pain can happen because there's anxiety, and anxiety can shut down arousal, which causes the body to not get prepared for intercourse. And so all of that anxiety, all the nerves, all the first time kind of fears can actually set the body up to have not a good experience. Whereas if we take that pressure off of ourselves, we really create space to be able to enjoy the experience and ease our way into intercourse in a way that doesn't have to be painful.
Yeah, for sure. Tish, would you respond any other way with that, with what Josh just said?
Yeah, I think I feel like there can be this like pressure of like, if we start and we don't finish, like something terrible is going to happen.
Right.
Sex life will be cursed for a dozen years, or something like that.
But I think that is like this pressure that couples can put on themselves of like that, even for women to experience an erection as pressure of, oh, if he's turned on, if he's aroused, like there can be, I've heard my clients say this, like, I'm responsible for that. There's something like this pressure that can be felt of like, okay, if we begin to sexually engage, then it has to progress and it has to result in this outcome.
Intercourse specifically, right?
Specifically, and maybe even like, orgasms that are happening at the same, there can be all kinds of pressure and expectation put on, oneself about that. But I think especially for women that it's like, okay, if I don't follow through, like I'm failing somehow, I'm inadequate, like my body is not doing what it should be doing. And then that is really contributing to feelings of performance anxiety and pressure and anxiety, which is literally the antidote for sexual arousal. And your body cannot arouse when it feels pressured, when it doesn't feel relaxed. And so I think of being able to, if I could talk with the woman who sent in this question, I think I would say, I'm so sorry that happened. That's horrible. Like, that's so painful. That must have been scary and confusing. And then I think I would want to let her know that to pace yourself, take your time, and to give yourself permission that, and like when you're with your significant other, to really give yourself space to be attuned with where you are and what your body's feeling, and if it's feeling good, and slowing down if it doesn't, and going back to connection and communication, and letting that sense of connection and what feels good always be what is determining pace.
Totally. Let the body lead the way in those things. And if you're continuing to have, after, more than one experience of this nature, then you definitely want to reach out and get some help. Maybe a visit to a gynecologist to have a look at things to see if structurally there's some things that are maybe causing you difficulty, connecting with a sex therapist to be able to answer some questions about your experience and background in the interaction between you and your spouse that may be contributing to what's going on. The good news about these kinds of difficulties is they're very treatable. They're not uncommon. And, we've developed approaches to treatment that we can understand what's going on, and we can put together a treatment protocol that will enable you to navigate through that and not have that be your experience, and unwind any kind of aversions or damage that has been created from the pain thus far. So it's not a death sentence to your sex life.
Right. Yeah, totally. Not a life sentence. Even if some negative emotion has been paired, or if you've noticed, oh, now I'm having this anxiety towards sexually connecting, reach out for help. Very treatable. Yes.
Such good advice, you guys. And just continuing on with this, I guess, conversation of struggling with intimacy and struggling sexually, we had another question that came in from a wife who basically wanted to know. She says, my husband doesn't get or struggles to keep an erection with me. He doesn't suffer from ED. I'm losing interest. What can I do? Josh, I'm going to hand this over to you.
Well, I think he does struggle with ED. I think that's kind of what the first part of that question defined. And my guess is that when she says he doesn't struggle with ED, it means that he doesn't always struggle with ED, which can be really perplexing and confusing thing, right? That kind of situational erectile difficulty, as opposed to all the time, never able to achieve or maintain an erection, and having a sense that no matter what, I always have a flaccid penis, never able to achieve a full erection or maintain that. And so I think that's probably what it is that is creating the confusion in this situation, is that that's just not always the case. And so it's like he doesn't struggle with it all the time, which can create this real fear and anxiety. Like, is it me? Am I, is he just not attracted to me? Does he not just, want to have sex with me? Is there something wrong my experience that causes this to happen?
Like it could attach like a lot of shame to it.
Totally. Huge shame.
For both.
For both. Right. Absolutely. And so there's a few different things that could be going on here. But I totally understand maybe the fear and even the loss of interest, like she indicated here. Because when we start to feel shame and feel anxiety around our sex life, that has a way of really suppressing our desire. And so if she has this sense of, he's not interested in connecting with me, or there's something about me that she's not attracted to or doesn't want to, or whatever it is that kind of fills in that blank space of I don't know why this is happening. Mm-hmm. That then can translate into something that suppresses her desire, and because none of us like to feel rejected.
Right.
None of us like to feel failure. None of us like to feel shame. And so if approaching or engaging sexually leads in us feeling rejection, feeling failure, feeling shame, then we're going to eventually lose our interest in engaging sexually. So that's not an uncommon experience for her to be experiencing when faced with a challenge like this. So that's a common thing. Now, on his side, there can be a number of different things that are going on, right? Lots of questions as a sex therapist about figuring out why that is the case, right? So some of the most simplistic reasons why that can be the case are I have an experience where I have difficulty achieving or maintaining erection, which happens to every man at some point in his life, right? Like that's just 100% of men experience erectile difficulties of one sort or another at one point or another in their life. 1 in 1 men. This is normal. That would be like saying that, women experience a sexual experience without having an orgasm, right? 1 in 1 women are going to have a sexual experience or sexual experiences without having an orgasm. That's just normal for female sexuality. That doesn't mean that something's wrong. That's just the way bodies are. 1 in 1 men are going to experience erectile difficulties of one sort or another, one point or another. Sometimes that's just fatigue. Sometimes that's they had too much to drink. Sometimes there's anxiety and stressors of life that are kind of weighing on them, that are distracting and getting in the way physically. It could be any variety of things that cause that to happen. But then it happens, And suddenly there's this fear of, oh my gosh, why did that happen? Right? There's this kind of anxiety, like, am I broken? I'm too young to be having this experience, or maybe I'm too old to be having sex, or maybe, all of this fear and angst comes in, and is it going to happen again? And this anticipatory anxiety thing starts, this anticipatory anxiety loop where I'm afraid it's going to happen again. The fear and anxiety in my body around it happening actually blocks the arousal and becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And it does happen again, which increases my fear. Now I'm more afraid that it's going to happen again, which further inhibits it. And it becomes this downward spiral towards impotence where I'm not able to have erections. And in that scenario where it's this anticipatory anxiety, man still may have a morning erection. He still may, see erotic, material out there somewhere, a billboard, or, see his spouse, or, some other kind of sexually erotic content, and feel physiological arousal and experience a full erection kind of in that setting. But then it's that setting of connecting with a spouse that anxiety comes in, that I'm going to let her down. She's going to be disappointed. I'm going to fail again. She's going to be upset. She's going to think it's about her. And all of the pressure and anxiety comes in. And in that situation, the arousal is blocked, creating this kind of situational erectile dysfunction, erectile difficulty, that is not all the time, but is with that partner, is with their spouse, is in that setting. And so that's one really common scenario where that could happen. There's others that we could get into, and I would have questions as a sex therapist to try to rule out other possibilities, but that's a really common one.
Yeah. Tish, would you mind just speaking into this wife who is losing interest? What can she do about the situation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm feeling for this couple. I think that sexual issues and experiencing sexual dysfunction can feel very isolating, can feel like in the relationship, like it can become this like divisive issue where both people have a lot of fears and shame about it. Like, is there something wrong with me that's not desirable enough? That's not like keeping his interest, right? It can feel really rejective for her. It can even feel like there can be like resentment of like, why don't you want me? Or why am I not enough? That can bring up her own insecurity. And then for him, definitely a fear of like, okay, every man should be able to do this and be able to like sexually perform for, his spouse, and I can't. And so I'm broken, just like what Josh was speaking to there. And so I think that I would just want to, just encourage her that, whatever emotion she's feeling, to reach out and to make space for that if she is feeling rejected, for her to know that, it is not because she's not desirable enough, that isn't what, that is not an issue like with her desirability. And then I would want to encourage her to talk to her husband about this, to not let something like this like be quiet and silent, because then it tends to blow up and get bigger and kind of like it's a little bit like it becomes toxic, and that just like kind of begins to seep and impact the whole relationship. I would want to encourage the couple that if it is situational erectile dysfunction, especially, that the emotional atmosphere of the relationship really matters. And so for there to be a sense of safety in the relationship, a sense of acceptance that is about who I am as a wife, who you are as a husband, and that is bigger and stronger than how we sexually perform. That when that's the atmosphere of a relationship, like that is the culture that can cultivate sexual healing when there is dysfunction. There's nothing more important in a relationship than that, for that sense of safety and for that sense of connection to be protected. And so I think I would just really would want to encourage her in that it sounds like she's not feeling safe. And so I think, to give her permission to say, hey, like, this doesn't feel good to me. Like, how is this feeling to you? And to kind of begin there.
That's
Totally.
So
Sometimes this can get into a really vicious thing relationship wise, right? And because of our own fears and anxieties and defenses, we can react in ways that are self-sabotaging. Right? Like sometimes I'll be working with a couple, and the wife will feel rejected, will feel hurt, will feel like maybe it's about her, and him not being attracted, or maybe there's fears in her mind that he's comparing her to someone else, or maybe there's porn involved, or infidelity, or something like this. All these kinds of fears that get going, which certainly could be part of the picture. I'm not ruling those out, but obviously are not only as part of the picture. But that fear can create a defensiveness that then turns into this kind of rejection and pushing out and blaming and attack, and kind of belittling in some ways, because I'm hurt, I'm angry, I'm scared, so I'm not showing up as my best self. And so becomes kind of pressure and demand unintentionally from the wife to the husband, which just makes the situation worse, right? It's like, well, if you love me, you'll get an erection. Oh boy, that's a sure way to losing an erection, right? No pressure there. The measure of my love for you is whether or not I can get an erection right now. That's a lot of pressure, and pressure is not good for erections.
No, that's so good.
Not good for like achieving and maintaining erections.
Yeah, it's so good. Like these questions that we get around sex therapy simultaneously like are encouraging to me and then also heartbreaking to me, because we know what sex was designed to be. And we know like the beautiful, amazing, pleasurable thing that it was designed to be. And it's sad for me to realize that we're all struggling and we all struggle in these different ways. And so it's like simultaneously so encouraging, because I'm like, yes, like healing is possible. There's hope for your sexual relationship. But also, I hate that you have to go through this. Like, I hate that you're experiencing this struggle the way that you are.
Yeah.
Likewise, I feel the same way. And I feel the sadness and the compassion, just having sat with so many different couples and knowing how painful it is to go through these struggles. And at the same time, kind of feel the hopefulness and appreciate just what we're doing here and getting good information out there about the reality of healing and restoration and redemption that can be a part of our sexual experience, that can transform what would be or has been painful and disconnecting to something that's connective and whole and feels good and is such a rich and vibrant, positive part of relationship.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Love it. You guys, if you are just now hopping on, just kind of tuning in, we are doing a very special 2-day event for My Counselor Live, all around sex therapy Q&A. Guys, we get so many questions throughout the week from y'all, from our website and from Facebook. And we love getting to interact in this way and pour into you guys with this resource, really, of these two incredible clinicians on our team who are both trained in sex therapy. And so if you're tuning in, we're happy you're here. And hopefully this is able to give you some encouragement and really just some wisdom on how to handle situations in your own life. And I'm just so thankful to be here. So if you are thinking of questions along the way, you are more than welcome to shoot us a message on Facebook with them, or go to MyCounselor.Online/ask, and we will definitely answer your question in a future episode. So make sure and submit those to us. And just to continue, if you're here and you're watching, go ahead and put an emoji in the comments on how your Wednesday is going. Just pick one. Let us know how you're doing today. And so we're going to hop into our next question. And I am going to start by directing this question over to Josh. So Josh, this person said,
rolled up, ready.
Love it. Okay. So this person said, I'm 21 years old and seem to have lost my sex drive. I am never aroused when my partner is. What can I do?
Yeah. It's a good question.
Yeah, they don't specify.
I love that they make it. I know, right? They live a real gender neutral in that, and so kind of we'll have to come at it from both angles here, both sides.
Perfect. Here. You know it. Go.
No, I appreciate the question, and I appreciate you reaching out and going, "Hey, something doesn't feel right here. I don't know why I'm experiencing this, but it's creating some anxiety for me." either because it's creating relational distress and disconnect, or maybe there's just this kind of fear inside me about what's happening with me. What does this mean? What's this about? Lots of different reasons why a person could be experiencing this. And so as a sex therapist, I'd be wanting to ask questions like, how long have you been in this relationship? Are we married? What's the quality of the current relationship? Is there conflict and disconnection? Is the relationship otherwise close? Good communication? Are there any physical conditions that are involved? Are you on any medications? There's just like many questions that we as sex therapists would ask to try to narrow down what is going on here. But hopefully what you can take away from that is that there's a lot of different things that could be going on, and that lots of people face and have similar experience, and that it can be understood, it can be troubleshot, and whatever is causing it in your situation, that can be identified, and a pathway to restoring that desire in a way that feels good to you and to your husband and or wife, whichever the case may be for you, can be figured out. I think I'm just going to kind of maybe speak to a couple of common ones that come up real frequently. Sometimes there's a shift when you get 6 to 18 months into your relationship, particularly into marriage, right? Where for a wife specifically, the sexual experience shifts from a dopamine-driven experience to an oxytocin-driven experience, and that looks a lot different in the body, in the initiating desire department.
Yeah,
Than
to the newbies, what do those hormones tell us what those mean, what each of those are, to the people who are watching who are like, what did you say? X of what?
Right
Like,
on. Yes. So dopamine is a neurotransmitter in the brain that is associated with pleasure and excitement. And so, Christmas morning when you're tearing open presents and you're elated, that's a dopamine that's flooding your brain, and you're super excited about kind of the newness that's there. And that gets fueled by adrenaline, which kind of amplifies the excitement and explosion. And then similar to, after Christmas, when you were a kid, 3 months later or a few weeks later, the newness has worn off. The dopamine high that was created from initially opening that present kind of wears off, and the toy kind of goes in a pile of other toys, right? Because that's how dopamine works. It's a flood in new experiences and the newness of interactions that create a really fun high emotionally that we experience. Oxytocin, on the other side, is not a high kind of experience. It's more of a warmth kind of experience, right? It's where we feel closeness and connection. It's an intimacy hormone where we bond with other people. Mothers bond with their children in experiencing oxytocin. Couples feel lovey-dovey towards each other in the oxytocin flood that happens in the body, and creates a warmth and connection. Well, for when it comes to our sexuality, the newer relationships and the newness of relationship, that dopamine kind of drives the interaction, right? And so, especially as it's spiked with adrenaline here and there, that causes it just to be like this super high sexual experience that we crave and want more of. Like eating candy, some sort of like, tastes good, want more, right? That kind of engagement. When we normalize in a relationship, it's not exactly like, the toy on Christmas morning that kind of loses its excitement. But it is on the dopamine side. Dopamine kind of drops off, and oxytocin becomes the regulating hormone. That is the bond and the closeness and connection of our relationship is what modulates the sexual experience. And so if we're not aware that that's a normal transition, when we maybe experience some of our initiating desire as a female dropping off, there's a sense of something has changed here. And I'm not sure what it is. Am I losing my attraction? Am I losing my interest? When in reality, in a normalized relationship, it wouldn't be uncommon for a woman to only experience that initiating or kind of bodily craving for sex, but a few days a month, right around ovulation, her body drops an egg and gives her a little hormonal push that says, go find your man and fertilize this thing. But otherwise, for it to be more oxytocin, relational, receptive, desire kind of interaction. And
No, I
so,
love that you touched on that, because I feel like we look at it and think it should be opposite, right? Like that we should bond and then we're always like lovey-dovey all over each other, super happy.
mhm,
But in reality, it's the opposite. And I feel like that's not what people expect. Even like I think of the expectations you have going into marriage. Like I feel like that's not something you expect.
totally. It can feel like a bait and switch thing. It's like, what's up with
Totally.
that? Like, we couldn't keep our hands off of each other before we got married. And now, we're, 18 months, 2 years in, something like that. And it's
Right.
kind of
Yeah. And that's a
like,
totally natural thing and the way that God designed it. But sometimes I think we have a tendency to say, well, what's wrong with us? Like what happened to us?
yeah, Netflix and chill kind of went to actually like just
Just
Netflix
chill.
in my sweats and kind of sitting on the couch, kind of binging.
Yeah. Just straight chilling. Like,
Just chill.
I mean, genuinely, I've been married about 14 months now. So I feel like we have kind of gotten out of the newlywed phase.
Yeah.
And is that just comfort, just like being
Mhm.
together and not being all over each other, sitting on opposite sides of the couch and being totally
Uh-huh.
content.
Like old married people.
No. But I have a tendency to say, what happened to us? But in reality, that's just the way that God designed it and designed our hormones to react to being married to each other.
Yeah, it's so good to normalize this, because I feel like what's really cool about oxytocin is that it creates, like it meets a felt, the need we have to be connected and known and loved and safe. Like it is literally, God wired our bodies to have a felt sense of that. And that is the like physiological aspect of God's design. And so whenever there's oxytocin and bond in the relationship, it actually protects the dopamine levels from going to addictive levels in sexuality, which is really because dopamine can be dangerous. Dopamine is kind of the neurotransmitter in the brain that is active with pornography and with sex addiction and with any type of
And
addiction.
cocaine.
And cocaine. And with sugar.
Seriously, cocaine causes huge dopamine. It hits dopamine receptors in the brain. And so it simulates kind of this rush of dopamine that you're having and burns out those kind of dopamine receptors to where normal life no longer creates a sense of excitement of life, that it requires like cocaine in
Oh,
order
it's so
to
crazy the way
feel
that
alive
God
again.
designed our bodies. It's so insane.
And I think that our culture can put forth like dopamine sex as like, this is what is good. This is what it should be like. This is like
Every time, all the time.
And they're totally missing like really like our need, like, yes, and I've been married 15 years and I can say that sexual connection, and as you continue to grow sexually, that your relationship sexually grows and deepens and becomes better and better over time. And that what we learn is that actually how culture defines sexuality is totally wrong. Like what they put up is like, want this, get this, this is the best, this is the most amazing. It isn't, like it just isn't. And so I think I just want to say for couples out there that this is not like the consolation prize. Like oxytocin is not the consolation prize. Like it is actually the feeling of like, I'm seen, I'm known, I'm safe, like you're my home. And that sexuality in that setting is actually way more fulfilling than dopamine sex, which is really just about which is great. Like praise the Lord for dopamine in the beginning of relationships, because he wired it that way so people would actually get married and get together and like stay together and build relationships. But it's just like, for God's design to be known by new couples out there, that it's like, this is a gift.
Yes. And, sometimes folks, we'll see comments every now and then in videos or different places from folks that don't come from a faith background or a faith perspective. And they're like, Christians kill sex and make sex terrible and not fun and so on. And I find it really interesting that all of the secular research reinforces everything that we're talking about here, that all of the studies that around sex, go back. I remember when I was studying sex therapy and becoming a sex therapist, there was the first huge scale study on human sexuality that had been was done in recent years. I think it was done late 90s, early 2000s. I guess it would have been early 2000s that this study was done. And they're looking at sexual satisfaction, right? Who's having the most sex, who's enjoying sex the most. Like they're trying to kind of figure this out, right? And it came back that middle-aged women who were married and who were Christian in their faith were having the most sex and enjoying sex the most. And Rolling Stones magazine did a cover piece on it, said, "This Revenge of the Church Ladies" on it. Like it was just this insane kind of mind-numbing weird thing to believe that this could be true. But it's a feature of what Tish is talking about, that that married couples who are in safe and established relationships have the most sex and they have the most fulfilling sex life, that the intimacy and the connection that's designed as part of sex makes for really fun and rich sex life that develops and grows year after year and gets better as time goes by. And the idea that it's supposed to be dopamine sex really just leads to heartbreak and trouble, because it's the same idea that we talked about with, the Christmas morning toy, right? Like very rarely does a kid enjoy the Christmas morning toy to another Christmas, right? Before it becomes old hat, because that's how dopamine works. And relationally, eventually the relationship stops creating a dopamine high. And what that sets us up for is we've fallen out of love, right? And then I leave you to find someone else new that's going to create this dopamine high. And that wears off, and I leave you and I go somewhere else. And rather I go somewhere else and hook up and find a new relationship, or I turn to porn and I look for the continual new that's there, and I stay in a relationship with you, but I'm not intimate and connected because I'm training my sexuality to run off of this dopamine high that isn't sustainable in a normal, healthy, connected relationship. And so that mentality of that this is how sex is supposed to be is incredibly destructive to relationships, which then is destructive to the family unit as families break apart as a result of that. And the society is really jacked up by it. And so it has some really profound and far-reaching implications, the idea that that's the way sex is supposed to be and something's wrong if it's not that.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I get a little passionate about that.
No, I love it. Tish, what would you say?
Getting our soapboxes out. We're like, can you tell we're a little passionate, Tori?
I love it. Hey, that's
As
why we do
we
this.
see this all the time, man.
That's
We're like
why
on the
I
front row
wanted
of
to do
it.
this one with you guys, because I knew that you guys were going to be passionate about it and excited to talk about these things with me.
We are so passionate. And I think that I've seen a lot, like connection is hard. I recently celebrated 15 years of marriage, and I loved what one pastor, I know, yay!
Congratulations.
Thank you. What one pastor friend messaged, and he said, a hard marriage, what did he say? A bad marriage is hard work, and a good marriage is even harder work. Congratulations on having a great marriage. But I'm like, that is so true. Like connection is so hard. And if you look at your relationship and you're like, man, I don't know what's wrong, and this is hard, and it doesn't feel good, and there's so much pain, then like that A lot of times I see couples kind of look at the sex life, which is actually a result of there not being connection. Like the sex life is disconnected and there's difficulties sexually, and whether frequency or there's, just like kind of resentment or blame or insecurities around the sexual life. And it feels like that's what's causing the disconnection, when really it's the disconnection is a relational, emotional aspect. And so with the person, I think that's my biggest question for them that is 22, like, hey, why don't I want to have sex when my partner wants to have sex? And I'm really curious about the connection. And, of where is that and what does that look like? And is that healthy? And what are the problems there, the issues there? And really being willing to take a look at that, because healthy sexuality, thriving, fulfilling sexuality, right, which God created us for, and we all want to have in our relationships, is an outflow of healthy connection. And connection is hard, Josh. I mean, it's so hard.
It is. It is. And yet the isolation is even harder, right?
Yeah.
And isolation is traumatizing. And, there's this tug of war between the vulnerability of connection and intimacy in relationship and the pain of isolation that creates this tension just in all of our different relationships, that the fear of being hurt, the fear of being wounded causes us to stand back and be guarded in that. But then it leaves us lonely. Lots of married couples that are lonely, and they live under the same roof. They share a bed, but they feel lonely and disconnected from each other. And so they're feeling the pain of that isolation, even though they're, married and in a relationship. And so there's, it's hard work to engage connection, that connected, intimate relationship is incredibly powerful in terms of every aspect of our life. Like, it's amazing when you look at the research around it. The emotionally focused therapy folks have done some different research studies, and it's really cool to see things like immune response. And when you're in a healthy, connected relationship, your body is more resilient to fighting off attack. And people recover faster from heart attacks post-surgery when they have a healthy, connected relationship. Indicators for vets when they come back from war trauma, and suicide rates amongst those that have healthy, connected relationships versus those that don't. In fiscal stability, in terms of savings and money in the bank, and quality of life scores. And there's just on so many different measures, relationship quality and having healthy, strong attachments and connections in your life show up in every area of quality of life that you can measure. It's just amazing. It's almost like we have a relational God that created people to be in relationship with each other and have this kind of intimate connection. Like,
almost like that. And
almost like that.
And I think I would want to tell maybe this person that's writing in, and couples in general, like, I would want them to know to make connection the main thing.
Mm-hmm.
Be very patient with their sexuality and their sex lives while they work hard at connection.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to bring up their concerns, bring up their feelings, but to not make it about sexuality only. Because I think that's a recipe for creating more disconnection.
Totally. We get the cart before the horse, right? That a really healthy sexual relationship is the product of a really strong, healthy, intimate connection in the relationship, right? Which, again, because of the dopamine on the front end, can feel like the opposite, right? Because we barely know each other, don't have a deep, intimate connection. We just find each other attractive, and there's a dopamine high and an adrenaline rush from that. And so it feels like the greatest sex happens in these superficial kinds of relationships or connections. And so there's this kind of myth that we get caught in and suck in, when in reality that the richest kind of connection sexually and the most fun, pleasurable, and rewarding sex lives flow out of the deep connection in a healthy relationship.
Yes.
Yeah, so true. Man, I am just so happy I got to sit down with you guys. We have already made it an hour. So, oh my goodness, time flew because you guys just amaze me every time with how knowledgeable you are about this, but also just how much compassion each of you have as you speak to these different people and their different struggles that are valid and real and important to talk about and normalize. So, thank you guys so much. And y'all know, this is not just a one-day thing. We will have a special My Counselor Live episode again tomorrow of Josh and Tish. Josh and Tish are going to hop in, talk through more of your questions that you've sent us around sex therapy, and make sure and tune in tomorrow at 2 p.m. Central Time. And Josh and Tish, we will see you guys tomorrow.
Hey, thanks, Tori. Looking forward to it.
Thank you, Tori. See you later.